So today, this week, we start week 6. This is Exodus. And so this week and basically half of next week, we're going to be in the book of Exodus. So we're going to blow through another book pretty quick. Genesis, we covered it. And so we covered not only creation and the flood, but then we ended up, with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the 12 sons, the story of Joseph at the end, and then we stopped and then we moved to the book of Job. Okay, and then so we covered 2 weeks with the book of Job. Now Job fits there only for the fact that it looks like he's a contemporary of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. In that time period of the world, he would fit into that area. Now the thing about Job is we find out stuff that Job, poor guy, never knows. He never knows why he's going through all this. Okay, but we get to see not only Job, and God says that Job is a righteous man, but we also get to see a conversation between God and Satan. We also get to see Job and his friends and their conversations, and then everybody's mouth shuts when God shows up and God speaks. And so we get to learn a lot about those type of things through that book. Now today and this week and next big part of next week into the book of Exodus going back, and it's going to tie the book of Genesis back together in the time periods. All right. So in essence, what I'm saying is Exodus is going to go back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the 12 sons that are going to, and then it's going to kind of pull that together, and from there it's going to break out into the 12 tribes will come from that. Okay, the 12 tribes of Israel. So if you look in Exodus chapter 1, the beginning of Exodus chapter 1 goes back, and it's pulling the information there at the end of Genesis back together. And it's telling us these are the names of the sons of Israel who came to Egypt with Jacob. And it gives us the list of the names. And then verse 5 says the total number of Jacob's descendants was 70. Joseph was already in Egypt. So Joseph, remember, he gets a wife. Pharaoh gives him a wife, and then they have some kids. All right, and so you've got Joseph, his wife, and his kids already in the land, and then he's now moved up in there. He's the second in command when all this takes place. Okay, and he sends and has his father and all the brothers and all their families brought to Egypt. For what purpose? There was a famine in the land, and it was to save them. When Jacob and all of the family come into the land of Egypt, that starts a clock. That starts a 400-year or 4-generation clock. Where did that come from? Genesis chapter 15. The night when God was speaking to Abram at the time, when Abram was 75 years old. And he's making that covenant with him. And remember, he has him cut the animal pieces in half. God that night says some things that he's fixing to start putting those pieces together. One of the things he says that your descendants, and at this point he's had none, but your descendants will one day be in a land that's not theirs. They're going to be there for 400 years, and then he says 4 generations. A biblical generation is 100 years. So it's not meaning 400 years to the very day, but it is meaning in that period, in that 400 years. Okay, so that clock doesn't start that night when he tells Abram that. When does that clock start? Right here, around about 150 years later, when Joseph brings the family into the land, and when they come into the land of Egypt, that starts the clock ticking on that 4 generations. That's what this is talking about. When they come in, they're 70, plus at least 4 when you got Joseph, his wife, and 2 kids, and there may be other kids, but we only know of the 2. Okay, so you've got 74, 75 people in the land when the clock starts. Remember, God's going to be doing what? He's going to be building a nation. 75 people are not a nation. They're a tribe, they're a clan, but they're not a nation. Okay? But that starts the clock. Okay? Now, verse 6, when Joseph and all his brothers and all that generation died, talking about all those who came in, but the Israelites were fruitful and increased rapidly, multiplied, and became extremely numerous, so that the land was filled with them. God's told them that they're going to be fruitful and multiply. Why is He doing that? He's building a nation. Okay? He's building a nation. And to build a nation, you need what? Numbers. You need people. So God's building a nation. So after Joseph and those original people, as they get older and they die out, okay, the generations, they're just still multiplying. Kids are growing up and having kids, and they're growing up and having kids, and it's multiplying. And with the help of God, who is making them fruitful, they are multiplying faster and faster and faster. Okay? Verse 8, a new king who had not known Joseph came to power. Now, what's this talking about? Does this mean a new guy he's the grandfather of Pharaoh? I mean, he's the grandson of Pharaoh, and he comes up and he goes, you know what? Joseph died out a few years ago. I don't really know him. No, that's not what it's talking about. This is not knowing Joseph. This is a regime change or a dynasty change. And in that time period, Egypt goes through a few of those. Okay? When you have a dynasty change, a new family takes over leadership of a kingdom, do they have any care or concern for the people who came before them? Not at all. So what's happening here is you've got a whole new dynasty, a new king, a new Pharaoh who has no care or concern for what came before him. He doesn't care about Joseph. He's got nothing that ties him to Joseph. He'd care less. Okay, that's who's come to power. In verse 9, he said to his people, look, the Israelite people are more numerous and powerful than we are. They're multiplying. Okay, they're multiplying. Let us deal shrewdly with them. Otherwise, they will multiply further. And if war breaks out, they may join our enemies, fight against us, and leave the country. What's he worried about them leaving for? Well, at this point, they're not slaves, but what he is liking is the fact that God brought them in wealthy, and they're very, very wealthy. They're very talented. Okay? He doesn't really want to lose his economy. Okay? And they're a big part of it. And so he's also worried about that there's so many of them, they might join one of those other nations that come in with the army, and they would be able to overthrow him. Well, 70 people, they're not worried about that. But this time period has gone on long enough that they have grown into a very sizable amount of people, to where he looks around and says, we got a problem. There's a lot of them. Now, there's some speculation at what period and point in time all this happens. I kind of lean toward somewhere in the halfway mark, maybe a little past halfway of the 400 years, 200 years, 250 years. Somewhere in there is when they become slaves. Because if you're a people group that's multiplying and you're the superpower of the world, you're not really worried about them to the point of putting them into slavery when there's 10, 15, 20,000 of them. But when they start to get extremely large in numbers, that's a different story. By the time you get to the 400 years, when they're going to come out, they're going to be 2.5 million of them. Okay, so they're growing at a large rate. Okay, so as he's looking at them, he starts to notice that I got a problem. There's a lot of them. And so what does he do? Look at verse 11. So the Egyptians assigned taskmasters over the Israelites to oppress them with forced labor. What did he do? He just made them what? Slaves, right? Now, when you take and they made somebody slaves, did you keep your wealth? No, that meant they what? They took all their stuff. They took their property, they took their wealth, and they put them into forced labor. Okay? He's using his strength, his political and military might to what? Take away all their stuff and to put these people in bondage. And what's he doing this for? There's a thing that's going on here that they're growing in numbers. There is a numerical issue going on here. Look at verse 12. But the more they oppressed them, the more they multiplied and spread out, so the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. The more they oppressed them, the more they what? Multiplied. See, this is a math problem right now. This is a situation where Pharaoh's trying to slow down the growth of the numbers of people. And how is he going to do that? He's got this thought, if I put them in bondage, I'm going to slow the numbers down. Here's his bad problem. He assumes that you work them hard and you put them in they're not going to continue to multiply. That's not how men operate. It don't matter how tired you are. Okay? I'm not going to go any farther. You get what I'm saying, right? It's just the reality of it. The thought process was, if I work you so hard, you'll be tired and we'll slow this thing down. And that doesn't happen. They continue to what? Grow. He's put them in bondage, trying to slow them down. When that doesn't work, Pharaoh goes to the next level. Look at verse 15. Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives. Okay? He's talking to the midwives, and he names two of them here, Shiphrah and Puah. Verse 16, when you help the Hebrew women give birth, observe them as they deliver. If the child is a son, kill him. But if it's a daughter, she may live. But the Hebrew midwives, however, feared God, and they did not do as the king of Egypt had told them. What's he trying to do? He's now trying to do what? Go and kill the babies. Again, this is about numbers. He's trying to stop the growth of the numbers of this people. Okay? And so why is he willing to kill the boys and not the girls? Well, one thing is you can take the girls and this time and day in the life of the world that's going on, the women would be helped to grow a nation. They could be used and helped to have babies for the Egyptians. Not the Hebrew boys. So what's he doing? He's trying to stop what? The growth. If you don't have any boys to grow up, you eventually don't have any fathers to have kids. He's trying to stop the growth. Now, why is it that their whole thing, they're trying to stop the growth? Well, one of the things you need to realize and remember is the Egyptian culture of that day may very well have been one of the most demonic cultures that's ever existed. Which means, if it's demonic, who's behind it? Satan. Okay? Satan knows what? He knows that God's building a nation, and he knows through that nation's coming that one that's been promised that's going to what? Crush his head, Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Satan wants to do what? Stop the growth so you can stop a nation, so you can stop a whole lot of God's plans. So what's behind Pharaoh wanting to stop all this and kill babies and put people in slavery to stop the growth is Satan that's wanting to do it. Anytime you get in any place that's wanting to kill babies, guess what's behind it? Satan. Satan wants to stop the numbers. So Satan's behind all of this. He's in the background, and he's the one that's driving this part to kill babies. Now, Pharaoh's looking at it from an earthly standpoint, and he's seeing what? I need to stop the growth. It's dangerous having this many people, and they're still growing. Okay? So that doesn't work. So he's putting them in bondage. That didn't work. He's now trying to get the midwives to stop and kill all the baby boys. That doesn't work. So basically these first two, the first one was kind of a political military move. Kind of big picture. Then the second one's getting the nurses to come in close and here's what we're going to do. But when that doesn't work, what does he do? He goes big time. He goes all in. Look at verse 22, Exodus 1:22. Pharaoh then commanded all his people, you must throw every son born to the Hebrews into the Nile, but let every daughter live. You throw them in the Nile, one of two things going to happen to a new baby. He's going to drown or crocodile going to eat him. What's the outcome? Both ways. Dead. And now he's not just kind of going quietly to the nurses. Basically, if it was in our day, he would be going on national TV, on CNN, and every other news network patched around his whole area of sphere of influence, and he would be getting up there and telling everybody, this is what you do. He's not hiding it. He's out in the wide open with, we're going to kill all the Hebrew babies. Okay? It's all about the numbers for him, but again, who's behind it? Satan. Satan's behind it. Okay? Chapter 2. Now a man from the family of Levi married a Levite woman. Why is Levite pointed out here? Well, I think a couple of reasons, but one of the reasons is the Levite family, the Levite line, the Levitical will be the Levitical priesthood, which they not only are the ones that are the priests, they're also the ones that handle the scripture. Okay? Moses is going to get what? He's going to get scripture. It's going to be passed down to him. And his brother Aaron's going to be the first high priest. Okay? So, time has gone on. They've been in bondage. A Levite family. Okay, verse 2, chapter 2, verse 2. The woman became pregnant, gave birth to a son. When she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. I like to play with this one a little bit, but look, this mother sees her child, sees that it's a beautiful baby, and so she hides him for 3 months. What was she supposed to do, or anybody who knew this baby was born, what were they supposed to do with this baby boy? Throw him in the Nile. She sees that her kid is a beautiful kid. Now look, I don't know of a single mother that has ever said, my kid's ugly. Every mother thinks their baby's beautiful. Now, some of us have looked at some of them babies and gone, ooh, right? But a mother doesn't think that. So it's got to be something more than that, right? The Bible doesn't give us a whole lot of background behind all of this, but I do think she knows that there's something special about him. And the fact that she's from the Levite family. Okay. Now, most of the people in the culture, most of the Hebrew people, I mean, we're talking now, we're starting to push out to the end of the 400-year period. And so most of them, all these generations have been growing up and living in the culture of the Egyptians, demonic, satanic culture of the Egyptians. But God's always kept a remnant. So maybe they know as Levites, maybe they know, maybe they're the ones it's been passed down. And maybe they know. Maybe they know something. Maybe they've even calculated it out and go, you know what, we're getting close to the end of that 400-year period. I don't know what the deal is. But she knows there's something special about him. Okay? Beyond the fact that he's just a good-looking kid. Again, every mother thinks their baby's beautiful. Okay? So, when she could hide him no longer, she does what? She takes him, she puts him in a basket, and she puts him out in the Nile. Now, here's the thing. She now's done what she was told to do, right? She's gone and put him in the Nile. There wasn't nothing that we were told that says he's got to be butt naked and swimming on his own. She puts him in a little basket and floats him out there. She puts him where he's supposed to be, puts him in the Nile. Verse 5. Pharaoh's daughter went down to bathe at the Nile, while her servant girls walked the riverbank. Seeing the basket among the reeds, she sent her slave girl to get it. When she opened it, she saw the child, a little boy, crying. She felt sorry for him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew boys." First of all, she knows immediately that he's what? A Hebrew. He probably looks a little different. She knows he's a Hebrew. I also think that God's got a sense of humor. Okay? God also knows how He made and wired women as mothers. Okay? I just kind of think that Pharaoh's daughter gets the basket, and as she opens it up, God just kind of reaches down and pinches little baby Moses right on the bottom of the foot and makes him cry. Because what happens to a woman when a baby cries? Oh. But to a guy, baby starts crying and we start going, would somebody make that thing quit? But y'all do what? Women go toward the baby while we want to run the other way. God knows what's wired in a woman. That motherly instinct. So when the baby starts to cry, what does she do? She's Pharaoh's daughter and she knows what's supposed to be done to a Hebrew baby boy, and she knows he's Hebrew. But what does he do? The mother strings of her heart get pulled. Okay? And she feels sorry for the child. Now, of course, the mother had the sister watching out for what goes on. Comes up, should I go get a Hebrew woman to come take care of the baby for you? Verse 8, go, Pharaoh's daughter told her. So the girl went and called the boy's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child and nurse him for me, and I will pay you your wages. So the woman took the boy and nursed him. Here's another reason I think God's got a great sense of humor. They're slaves. Okay? Pharaoh's daughter just told a slave, go do this and I will pay you. I'm going to pay a slave? Here's what's even funnier. Where's Pharaoh's daughter getting the money to pay the slave? Daddy. Pharaoh's paying, ultimately, the wages to nurse this kid. God's got set up to what? One of these days, come take your slaves out. On Pharaoh's dime. Okay? Again, I think God's got a sense of humor. Verse 11, years later, after Moses had grown up. Here's another time we kind of have to play with it a little bit, but he's grown up in the house of Pharaoh. He's supposed to have been a slave. But instead, because of Pharaoh's daughter, look, daddy's little girl gets whatever she wants. That's just a fact of life. Okay? I'm sure Pharaoh wasn't real thrilled about having an adopted grandson in his house that was Hebrew. Okay? But for the next about 35 years, Moses is going to be in the house. In that time, he's getting the best education. I mean, he's been to the College of Egypt. He's been to leadership training. He's been to probably their war or military college. He's learned all about the art of war. He's learned about managing people. He's learned all these things on whose dime? Pharaoh's dime. Will that become important? Well, in a few years, he's going to lead out 2.5 million people. Some leadership skills and the management skills of people. I'm sure he learned to do that on what? Pharaoh's dime. Okay? So he's learned all these things. Finish verse 11. He went out to his own people and observed their forced labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. So he also knew he was what? Hebrew. He wasn't mistaken that he thought he was Egyptian. He knew he was Hebrew. Okay. Looking around, seeing one of them, seeing no one. Looking around and seeing no one, he struck the Egyptian dead and hid him in the sand. He sees an Egyptian, which he's been raised as an Egyptian, beating a Hebrew. He looks around, nobody around, and he kills the Egyptian and hides him. Okay? The next day he went out and saw two Hebrews fighting. He asked the one in the wrong, "Why are you attacking your neighbor?" And then he said, "Who made you a leader and judge over us?" This is the words of jealousy. Exactly what this was. They knew it was Hebrew too. Who made you? You should be one of us. Who made you a judge and a ruler over us? Actually, God did. Okay. But these are the words of jealousy. Are you planning to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses became afraid and thought, what I did is certainly known. When Pharaoh heard about this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and he went to live in the land of Midian. Here's the thing. If Moses was an Egyptian and he's in the house of the king, so basically he's a prince, right? Had he have decided to kill somebody, would there have really been any repercussions in that? No. But he killed an Egyptian, and even though he was Pharaoh's adopted grandson, once he killed an Egyptian, what did Pharaoh want to do? Kill the Hebrew. Okay? Kill the Hebrew. So he does what? He runs. So where's he going to run? He's going to head off out into the wilderness. He's going to go out there for 40 years. Bible tells us that in that time period, Moses will become the most humble man that was on the earth at that time. Here's the thing. He didn't start there. I mean, think about it. If you were supposed to be a slave, but you got raised as the prince of the superpower of the world, you've had the best of everything. Would you be humble? Not a chance. How does he get humbled? 40 years in the wilderness being a shepherd. That'll get you. Go from the king's dining table to keeping smelly sheep. That'll kind of mess you up. That'll knock you down. That'll humble you up. That's what happens to him until chapter 3. We're going to kind of skate through a little of this, cover a little bit of ground. This is Moses in the burning bush. Here's the thing about the burning bush. He sees it. He sees a bush that's burning and it doesn't burn up. So his curiosity, look, every man's got this curiosity and want to go see something unusual. He takes off. Verse 5. Do not come closer, he said. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. Moses is just come in contact with the God of the universe. Remove your sandals. You're on holy ground. Why is it holy ground? God's there. Okay. Then he continued, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He's identifying himself at this point. I'm the God of who? I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Notice again, we talked about that a while back. It's not the God of Terah, Abraham, and Isaac, right? God's identifying what? His whole lineage in all of this is what? Because of Abraham. Choosing and calling him out. I'm the God of what? Of your father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You think he knows about? He's heard. He sure knows who they are. And he's heard probably about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so God begins to speak to him. Look at verse 12. I'm going to skip through this a little bit. He's telling him, I'm going to send you back. He answered, I will certainly be with you. This is God talking to Moses. And this will be a sign to you that I have sent you. When you bring the people out of Egypt, you will all worship God at this mountain. God's telling him, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm going to send you over here to go get the people of Israel. I'm going to have you bring them out, and you're going to know that it's me because I'm going to have you bring them back to this spot, and y'all are going to worship right here. Okay? Pinpointing what? There's a lot of geography, okay? But he's pinpointing right here is where we're going to come back. Verse 14. God replied to Moses, who's going, hey, when the people ask, what's your name? Verse 14. This is one reason today why I brought the different Bible, the HCSB, and you'll see why in just a second, because of the names of God here. Verse 14. God replied to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the Israelites. Listen to what I say. Don't read this. Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. The CSB and most other Bibles have changed that to the Lord. This says it the way it really was. He goes from I am to then he gives them a personal name that says Yahweh. Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. They will revere that name from then on. Okay? This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered in every generation. Verse 16. Go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, I have paid close attention to you and to what has been done to you in Egypt, and I have promised you that I will bring you up from the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites and all those ites that are right there. Okay? Yahweh, this is personal. And when did he make this promise to Abraham? Back in the early part of Genesis. When did he make it to Isaac? When he transferred the promises to Isaac. When did he make them to Jacob? When he transferred them to Jacob. Okay? And then from there it's going to go what? To the 12 tribes, to the descendants of them. Who Moses is what? One of them. Okay? Look at verse 18. They will listen to what you say. Then you, along with the elders of Israel, must go to the king of Egypt. Go to Pharaoh. And say to him, Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now please let us go on a 3-day trip into the wilderness so that we may sacrifice to Yahweh our God. Let's go for 3 days out there to sacrifice. Why God said it this way, I don't know. He wasn't going to let them go regardless. Just let them go so they can go sacrifice. Let your slaves go so they can go out and go sacrifice to who? Their God. Okay? So, of course, he's going to go, and what's Pharaoh going to do? Pharaoh's going to make one really interesting statement. When they first come, he'll go, I don't know who that is. I'm not letting you go. Which is an honest statement. Okay? When you come to somebody and go, hey, Stephen, John says, give me your truck. The first question you'd say is, who's John? And then, I don't know him and I ain't giving you nothing. So imagine that Moses and the leaders go, hey, Yahweh, our God, has told us to come to you and let us go. And he'll go, I don't know who that is. I'm not letting you go anywhere. Okay? Which then God's going to start with the 10 plagues. Now, we're not going to go through all those plagues. We just don't have time for that. What we are going to do is we're going to hit the 10th one for a minute. Because the 10th plague, the Passover, is one of the key pieces, not just of the story, but it's one of the key pieces of all Scripture. Chapter 11. Chapter 11, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, I will bring one more plague on Pharaoh and on Egypt. After that, he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will drive you out of there. He's not going to invite you out. He's going to throw you out. Now announce to the people that both men and women should ask their neighbor for silver and gold jewelry. The Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Why are they to ask for their silver and their gold? That goes back to that same thing about 550 years beforehand on the night of Genesis chapter 15 when God had him split the animals and God made a promise. One of the things he said was they're going to be in a land that's not theirs. They're going to be mistreated. They're going to be turned into slaves. Okay? But when they leave, they're going to have great possession. They're going to ask, and the Egyptians are going to give them their gold and their silver. They're going to leave wealthy, fulfilling a promise that God had made about 550 years before. Okay? God didn't forget anything, even the little details. Okay? Now, look over in chapter 12. Chapter 12, verse 1. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, "This is to be the beginning of months for you. This is the first month of the year." That's how come, this is Passover that he's talking about. So this is, in our day, it would be Easter time period. And that's how come Easter is usually sometimes late March to mid-early April. That's the period of time that this is. It will be the first month of the year for you. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, they must each select an animal of the flock according to their father's households, one animal per household. If the household's too small for a whole animal, that person and the neighbor nearest his house are to select one based on the combined number of people. You should apportion the animal according to what each person will eat. You must have an unblemished animal, a year-old male. You can take it from either the sheep or the goats. Must be what? It's got to be unblemished. No scars, no missing limbs, unblemished. Perfect, unblemished lamb. God's in the process of taking this one here and making this one a picture that will point for one day to the Messiah. Unblemished lamb. Okay? Then he says, verse 6, you are to keep it until the 14th day. So the 10th to the 14th day, that gives you time to what? To check it out and make sure it's unblemished. You also got it in the family. You got it in the house. Everybody's getting used to it. But also everybody knows that this thing's fixing to do what? It's fixing to be a sacrifice. Okay? You are to keep it until the 14th day of the month. Then the whole assembly of the community of Israel will slaughter the animal at twilight. They must take some of the blood, put it on the 2 doorposts and the lintel of the houses where they eat them. They're to take the blood and put it on the doorpost, across the doorpost. They are to eat the meat at night. They should eat it roasted over fire along with the unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Do not eat any of it raw or cooked in boiling water, but only roasted over fire. Its head and its, as well as its legs and inner organs. Do not let any of it remain until morning. You must burn any part that does remain before morning. Okay, don't hold on to it so we can make some stew with the leftovers. No. Right now, one time deal. That's it. Here is how you must eat it. You must be dressed for travel, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand. You are to eat it in a hurry. It is the Lord's Passover. Let's put it in modern language. He's telling them, when you get ready to eat this, have your clothes on, your shirt on, your shoes on, have the car packed, the trunk packed, have a gas tank filled up, have everybody ready, all the luggage in there. Eat this thing in a hurry because when we get finished with this, there ain't going to be lingering time. We got to go. What's coming is going to be so dramatic. They're not going to ask you, hey, when you get a chance to leave, can you go ahead and go? They're going to drive you out. Eat it fast. Eat it in a hurry. There ain't going to be time for leftovers. Be ready to go. Okay? I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night and strike every firstborn male in the land, both man and beast. I am Yahweh. I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. Who's behind all the gods of Egypt? Satan and the demons. Okay? And they've been behind what all this time? Trying to slow the growth and stop what? The Hebrews from becoming a nation. And God says, nah, judgment's coming. Verse 13. And the blood on the houses where you're staying will be a distinguishing mark for who? For you. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. Here's God coming in. And He's coming in for what? Judgment. Judgment on all of Israel. And He says, when I come in, if I look down and I see the blood, I will do what? Pass over. If I don't see the blood, what happens? Well, in this case, the firstborn of every family is going to die. What's the only distinguishing factor? The blood. The blood. It's been about the blood since the beginning of time. It's about the blood. Okay? And this blood that it's pointing to is what? This is pointing to what? A future event. More than 1,000 years before, from there, over 1,000 years into the future, will be the true Lamb of God who will show up, and John the Baptist will look and say, behold, the Lamb of God. They've had 1,000 plus years of knowing what the Lamb was for. Blood sacrifice. It's always been about the blood. Okay? This is the Passover. Okay? When this all happens, what's going to take place? Pharaoh and them are going to say, get out. Go. Get out. And they leave. 2.5 million of them. And they start out. And God then's leading. Okay, Moses and Aaron, they've been the mouthpiece and they've been the one God's using, but as soon as they leave out, the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud take over and are leading them. And doesn't lead them the short distance to the promised land. Leads them out the long way around. Matter of fact, brings them down south, brings them out and brings them a different direction. And they're going to come through several trials. Test, really. They're going to come out and they're going to end up, not long afterwards, they're going to end up with water behind one side and the Egyptian army on the other side. And what's God going to do? Perform a miraculous miracle, part the waters, and they're going to go across on dry land. Not long after this, they're going to get thirsty. And they're going to start arguing and whining about wanting water. And God's going to give them water. And they're going to start whining about food. And God's going to give them food. And they're going to start complaining about water again. And God's moving them. Now, what's taking place? Why is God performing these things and these tests and these miracles and showing them? Don't ever forget about the fact that for 400 years, these people have been in the land of Egypt, and they have been involved in the culture of Egypt for all that time. They're not in a godly society. They're in a demonic society. My best guess is a majority of the people, as the generations continue to go, or more of them are involved in the demonic and into the idol worship and into the culture than they are into God. God keeps a remnant, but the majority of the people do not know who their God is. For 400 years, He's been silent. They've grown as a people group from 75 people to 2.5 million people. And they don't know, the majority have no idea who their God is. The one true living God of the universe is. So He's showing them stuff visually. They're seeing stuff that most people don't get to see. Why? God's trying to also reveal to them who He is. They can put their faith and trust. They should be able to go, you know what? God just did all that back in Egypt, and He just parted the water. The last thing He's going to do is let me get out of here and die of thirst. If He can do all that, I mean, how hard is it to get me some water? Okay? They're having to learn these things. So before we get too hard on them, don't forget They ain't much different than us. Okay? In some ways, they saw things that we didn't get to see. Okay? Now, that gets them out, and they head out into there. As they go into the wilderness and they go through these trials, God's leading them back, and He's leading them back to one spot. That was the spot of the burning bush. To the mountain. Remember what God said? You'll know it's me because I'm going to bring you out, and I'm going to bring you back where? Right here. Right here to this spot. Okay? I ain't one of the many gods around. I'm the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the God who's made all these promises. I'm fixing to send you. We're going to bring all of them out, and then I'm going to bring you, not just randomly somewhere, right back here. Chapter 19. God's going to bring them here. And to me, this is one of those times that you get to see a piece of who God is and how holy He is. Chapter 19, verse 3. Moses went up the mountain to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain. This is what you must say to the house of Jacob and explain to the Israelites. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians. When did they see that? Hadn't been long ago. About 3 months. You saw what I did to them. Okay. Say to the house of Jacob and explain to them, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. Now, if you will listen to me and carefully keep my covenant, you will be my own possession. Out of all the peoples, although all the earth is mine, and you will be my kingdom of priests and my holy nation. These are the words that you are to say to the Israelites. They were to be a priesthood. What does a priesthood do? They're a go-between between God and man. They were to be the ones that were to be speaking out and telling the world who had gone back to idolatry who the one true living God was. Okay? That's what they're supposed to be. Verse 7, after Moses came back, he summoned the elders of the people, set before them all the words that the Lord had commanded. Then all the people responded together, we will do all that the Lord has spoken. So Moses brought the people's words back to the Lord. The Lord said to Moses, I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear when I speak with you and will always believe you. I'm going to come, Moses. I'm going to speak. The people are going to hear me speak to you, Moses, and they're going to always believe. Now, that's strong words, always believe. Is that true? If you were to go to Israel right now, find an Orthodox Jew and ask them, did God ever speak to Moses? And they will tell you without a doubt, God spoke to Moses. Matter of fact, you get to the New Testament when they're talking to Jesus and the Pharisees are arguing with Jesus, they'll even say, we know God spoke to Moses. We don't know about you, but we know God spoke to Moses. This is fulfilled all throughout time, even to this day. They're going to hear me speak to you, and they're going to believe this forever because of this event that's taking place right now. Back to verse 9. The Lord said to Moses, I'm going to come to you in a dense cloud so that the people will hear when I speak with you and will always believe you. Then Moses reported the words to the Lord. And the Lord told Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. They must wash their clothes. Does that sound like something that Jacob did? Remember the day when he told him, y'all clean up, get rid of the household idols and put on clean. We're going to purify ourselves. Same thing. Verse 11, and be prepared by the third day. On the third day, the Lord will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put boundaries for the people all around the mountain and say, be careful that you do not go up on the mountain or touch its base. Why? Holy God's coming down. So he's putting Boundaries on it. Anyone who touches the mountain will be put to death. Sounds like God's pretty serious, don't it? Okay. No hand may touch him. Instead, he will be stoned or shot with arrows. No animal or man will live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they may go up to the mountain, to the base of the mountain. Okay. Then Moses came down from the mountain to the people and consecrated them. They washed their clothes. He said to the people, be prepared by the third day. Do not have sexual relations with a woman. Why is this? Is this because women are unclean? No. Anytime you engage in that activity, it's not a clean activity. Bodily fluids, those type of things, you're not clean. You're not pure. Don't do all that. In this time period, why? Because it ain't about our wants and desires and our thing. This is about what? We're fixing to meet with the holy God of the universe. Okay? Don't do any of these things. Verse 16. On the third day, when morning came, there was thunder and lightning, a thick cloud on the mountain, and the loud trumpet sounded, so that all the people in the camp shuddered. Y'all ever stood at the base of a mountain? How big do you feel? The mountain's pretty big, right? What if you're standing at the base of the mountain, all of a sudden, where you're standing is okay, but the mountain starts to shake? And things start to happen on it. Think it might, you ain't very big at this point. Think you might start to, will fear factor jump in? That's what's going on. Then Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was completely enveloped in smoke because the Lord came down on it in fire. Its smoke went up like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain shook violently. As the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and God answered him in the thunder. And who's there to hear? 2.5 million people. What'd they hear? Moses speaks, and God what? Answers. Okay. We won't read it, but what's going to happen now? God's going to have Moses come up. God's going to warn them and say, hey, go back down and tell them, don't come up on the mountain. Because look, God knows human nature. And while there are a certain group of people, if something goes on, they want to run and hide, there's another group of people that want to go see what it is. Okay? And so he tells them what? Go back down and warn them, don't come up here. Hey, don't come up here. Chapter 20, I'm only going to say this. Look at verse 1. Then God spoke all these words. And what does he speak? Right here is the 10 Commandments. What's the first one? Have no other gods and no idols. And it goes from there. Okay? The 2.5 million people are standing at the base of the mountain, and what do they hear God speak? The 10 Commandments. His basis. Here's my basic standards right here. Here's the basis. They hear it. Did they hear about it? No, they hear it with what? Their own ears. Seemed like that guy Adam heard the same thing, didn't he? Abraham heard the voice of God talk to him, so when God told him to do something, he didn't wonder who it was, right? These folks heard God say, and it starts right there. Okay? Now, the fear of all that does what? The fear of all that, hearing God's voice and having God speak and the mountain shaking and all this stuff, and they decide, you know what? We're going to run back over here. They're going to hightail it out of there. We're going to go stand back over. You know what, Moses? We'll do whatever God says. You tell us. We don't want to hear what He has to say. Why? The fear of the Lord. Okay. Now Moses is going to go up, and what he's going to get over the next course of the time that he's up there for the next 40 days is going to be, most of that's going to be what we're going to end up looking at in Numbers and Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy, or mainly Leviticus and Numbers. Okay, is a lot of the stuff we're going to get. But while he's up on that mountain, What's going to happen down below? Oh, those folks down there, hey, we don't know what happened to, we don't know what happened to him. He's been gone a while. He's been gone up there quite a while, you know. Hey, we don't know what happened to him. So they come up with a brilliant plan. Hey, Aaron, make us an idol, make us a god. And so what does he do? Look, this is Moses' own brother. And he does what? He gets the gold and he fashions with his own hands. He chisels out a golden calf. And they decide to have themselves a little party. And they're worshiping this thing and they're partying. And Moses is going to come back down, right? That's why, hey, your people down there. Okay? And Aaron, who, Lord help him. Poor Aaron, he's so lucky. Because when he gets down there, after he's made this false idol, this false god for them, that they're standing around worshiping and doing whatever else they're doing with, okay? All this is going on down there, and when Moses gives him the benefit of the doubt. What in the world did they do to you to make you do this? Surely, they must put a gun to your head. They must have had a knife to your throat. What did they do to force you into this? And then, look, this again is the future high priest, okay? He's real lucky God didn't strike him dead. He makes a really dumb statement on top of that. You know these people. I just took the gold and threw it into the fire and poof, out comes this calf. That wasn't what happened. You're the one that made it. On multiple levels, he's real lucky that God didn't strike him dead. Okay? God's long-suffering. All right? He's long-suffering. Now, we get to see this as story form, what's happened to them. We get to see it, and we get to kind of see the whole thing laid out. They're having to live, their scripts, they're living it out, and they are becoming Scripture, basically. Their lives are going where? Right here in Scripture. It's playing out piece at a time in their life. We're reading about it. What do we get? We got the Passover. They were in bondage. Anybody know when you're caught in sin, you're in bondage. They were in bondage. They couldn't get themselves out. What happened? God's the one that redeemed them. God's the one that came. God's the one that did it. And on the 10th plague, what did he do? He sent God himself, not only was the judge, he sent the only way possible, and that was what? The blood of the unblemished, spotless lamb. And it was a picture of what? Of future event. God himself did. And then from there, look what happens. They have some tests going on out there, and then they get to where? They get to the mountain and they see and hear God speak, and he tells them. Now they screw up really bad. They do. And it's going to take them 40 years and everybody die off that comes out of the land before they get to go in. Okay? But God's working with them, but God takes and he establishes not just giving his 10 commandments, he then takes and starts to establish they're called out separate people. And they get dietary laws and how do you sacrifice the different things for all these they get all that. It's all because of who they are, and they're being called out as separate. But it's all this comes through what? Through them. They've got to live it out. We at least get the luxury of reading and learning about it. And then we also get the luxury of we're on this side of the cross. We are able to look and say all this stuff happened. And look, God's brought this all about throughout, not a story, throughout people's lives throughout time. Chronologically throughout time. It's always been about the blood. So what do you do with it ultimately? God's standard is what? Can any of us keep the 10 Commandments? Just the basic standard right there. Can any of us? No. It's impossible. And one sin against an infinitely holy God will take you forever in hell to pay. How many you got? You're never getting out of there off of one, much less the thousands upon thousands upon thousands. Okay? God himself was the only one that could do it. God himself steps off the throne. God himself comes, lives a sinless, spotless life. God himself goes to the cross. God himself spills his blood out. God himself walks into the Holy of Holies, not the one in Israel, into the one in heaven, and lays his blood on the altar and says it's finished. God himself. Payment what? Payment in full. Now, just because God did that, the gift's there doesn't mean that just it's out there. Everybody's got it. It's a gift. If you don't ever reach out and take the gift, it's not yours. Hey, I got you a gift. If you don't ever take it, do you ever get to use it? You don't ever get to apply it anywhere. If you reach out and take it, it's your gift. You get to use it. Sure. One of these days, every one of us are going to stand before God. It's guaranteed. One of these days, every one of us are going to stand before God. All right? And the thing is, you don't know if it's today, tomorrow, next week, 20 years, 30 years, or 100 years. Well, I can pretty guess none of us are going to be around 100 years. Somewhere before 100 years, every one of us are going to stand before God. Right? And we're told what? That when a man wants to die, and the judgment. What do you do? One of these days we're going to stand before God, the judge of the universe, the one who was the judge who showed up in Egypt that night, and he looked down, and if he did not see the blood, what happened? Judgment fell. If he saw the blood, what happened? He passed over. Here's you. Here's God. One of these days you're going to stand before God, the judge of the universe. He knows everything you ever thought, said, done. Anything, everything. And if it's just you standing before God, he looks at you. All he sees is all the sin and all the stuff, all the baggage you got. And the only thing he can do is execute judgment on you. Flip side. Here's you. Here's God. God of the universe. But this time, you've got what? You've got the gift. The gift of what? The blood of God himself. Jesus' own blood. Now when God the Father looks down, the judge looks at you, what does he see? Nothing but blood. And what can he do? Pass over. While all this happened in history, it all was a picture of something to come, and we get to look at it now and look back on it. Okay? This is a picture of salvation. This is a picture of what God's done. And it's also a picture of God's standard. That, by the way, we can't live up to in would you want to rely on the best 5 minutes you ever lived? Especially when God tells us that the best we've ever done is like filthy rags before a holy God. You can't rely on your best 3 seconds. Okay? What do we have to rely on? The finished work of Jesus himself. God himself. The value of that blood is priceless. The picture of the Passover lamb we get to see today, all the way back in the book of Exodus. Okay? And by the way, where did the blood sacrifice come from before that? Book of Genesis. Remember? Who started it? Adam and Eve sinned, and God did what to the animal? Killed the animal. Blood sacrifice started right there. Did it transfer on down? What about Abel? Okay. What did Noah do the first thing he did when he come off the ark? Built an altar, had a sacrifice. What did Abraham do? Built an altar, had sacrifice. What did Isaac do? What did Jacob do? What did they do the night of the Passover? The picture was vague, but it's getting more and more dialed in as time goes on. And it's getting more clear and more clear until we get to the New Testament when John the Baptist will look and say, the Lamb of God. The Jews would have been sacrificing lambs for so long, there was no question in their mind when he looks and says, the Lamb of God. They knew exactly what that meant.